glasses. Should I go with that? Should I do that?
Why not? Kalimera, kalispera, kalinichta. No matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be, thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. Squad Central is back. And just like the transfer window, there's a twist to tonight's show. Squaddies, it's good to be back.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
So 1 minute it's, SESKO, the next it's Gyökeres, the next is Ekatiki, or I'm sure I'm going to be schooled on how to pronounce his name tonight. Then it's Norgard, Odegaard, someone guard, safeguard. And then there's Ben Jacobs. And then, well, actually, is Super Tom
Graham
Canton.
Hunter. I was thinking about it as you were. So I was like, oh, I'm going to look like Graham Hunter. I was like, do I put on a Scottish accent? That would have made it even worse. But no.
So in true transfer fashion, Squaddies, things take a twist and a turn at the very end. Ben sends his apologies. He's covering the Manchester City game tonight against Al Hilal in Orlando. I think it's in Orlando. And he's not feeling too well. And he said, Soph, do you mind if I need to catch some sleep? I'm not feeling tip-top and I've got to cover the game tonight. What's a girl going to say? No, get on. This is the first show back. I've hyped you up all day. No, bless him. We send Ben our best, and I'm sure he'll feel, well in the next few hours to cover the game. So then when I got that message, literally, half an hour ago, I called up my friend, Tom Canton. I'm like, hey, Tom, are you watching Love Island tonight? Are you busy? Is your dance card filled? And here he is stepping in, super transfer. I mean, Tom, it is the time. These things happen. This is the era that we're living in.
Yeah. I mean, I have no life, so I'm just able to just kind of jump on and chat about Arsenal. So I'm happy to do it always, of course. No problem at all.
Thank you so much for jumping in, and good evening, Squaddies at ease. I've got to say, I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time zone I'm in. All I know is that I planned a show and I promised to do it tonight. And here I am. I'm sweating like swine. Tammy, my chief like officer, I've missed you so much. Welcome back. Tom, I couldn't wear a hat, right? And Squaddies know I'm really honest about what goes on in my life. I am in my... You know how Beyonce was in her Lemonade era? I'm in my perimenopausal era, I'm pretty sure. I'm like sweating, couldn't wear a hat, couldn't straighten my hair. And luckily my hair's grown. So I just tied it up. Didn't really get a tan when I was in Cyprus. It wasn't that type of trip. It was more like dealing with, family stuff and hanging out with family. I went to the beach, but because I feel hot flushy all the time, I couldn't do my Aphrodite, Island of Love, KO beer, sunbathing all day long. It's the first time I've ever gone to Cyprus where I didn't feel like sunbathing.
That's crap.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I had to share that with you, and I had to share it with the Squaddies. So yeah, and your trip looked amazing. I know you told your Gooner talkies about it, but the Squaddies, you went to Canada and you were like, I've been to Banff and all those places. It's beautiful, isn't it? Did you love it?
Yeah, I did. No, it was great. It was a much needed break. I was anxious about, I was really Medway, wasn't it? I was well anxious about that. I was really anxious about kind of going, and obviously I haven't taken a step away from the channel in 3 years. So that was weird. The biggest break I've had of not doing shows. And there was always that anxiousness that, no, I'm going to come back and no one's going to be here. And everyone's going to forgot about the 8 a.m. But they were there when I got back, which was great. And it's going good. But yeah, the trip was needed. The scenery, humbling nature, actually, a little bit of the northern parts as well with the fires that have affected. And obviously, I know that you've obviously been affected by that in California quite significantly in recent times. So yeah, certainly that was an experience as well. So it was a great trip, and yeah, I would definitely recommend.
Yeah,
not Vancouver though. Not a big fan of Vancouver, to be fair.
What didn't you like about Vancouver? Did you feel it was too much like London?
No. Basically, every time we walked along a street, right, there wasn't like, I know there are nice bits of Vancouver, like Granville Island's nice, you know, down the front by the water's quite nice, Stanley Park's nice, but our hotels, wherever we stayed, you'd walk out the door and there'd be someone like lighting up some substance within about
a
2
doobie
yards. Yeah, no, like worse, a lot worse than that.
Oh,
so like and it was like so widespread. I couldn't believe I'd never seen the volume of that happening in a city.
In Vancouver, really?
Yeah, but I was doing a little bit of Googling about it. Apparently there's been like a legalization of a lot of stuff, so as like a trial apparently. But you know, I mean, clearly people are taking advantage of it. So, you know, yeah. But it was, yeah, Vancouver was there was some rough parts of Vancouver, I have to say. Maybe that was just where G booked the hotels. Maybe it's her fault. I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, this is, I don't want to really get into it, but yeah, this is kind of like what some of this experimental stuff going on in some cities in the US and Canada. Yeah, it's not a good idea, you know, and you still need things intact, things that are important, like the police. I know some people have issue, but no, you can't call a social worker when there's bad things happening on the street. You need the cops. Anyway, speaking of cops, we are the transfer cops, and I'm so happy that you were available, Tom, because I'm not going to lie, I'm well versed in a good few of these players. But there are a couple of players I'm not well versed in. All right. But I want to start at the very tippy top of the transfer mountain with you because it's July 1st tomorrow. Some financial doobry whatsits apparently kick into play. A lot of Arsenal fans have thrown their toys out the pram. I have loved switching off. It has been amazing. Because even some of my friends who are YouTubers kind of lost their marbles a little bit when it comes to the signings or lack thereof.
Yeah.
Do people realize that the transfer window does close in September? And also, I know we want everyone together. We want a full squad before everyone goes away for preseason, blah, 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 blah. But I just wanted to start with that front in... I'm exhausted by the fact that people are exhausted by the fact that we've made no official big signings. Just the rhetoric around it, that we're a loser club. Winners and losers, you see Liverpool and Chelsea, of course, making signings. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm a little bit. I missed 2 weeks of it. You know, the theme that I came back to was, Tom, you haven't missed anything. Ironically, the day I returned, obviously the Norgard stuff happened, and the day after that, MOSQUERA stuff happened, and I was thinking, wow, they've very kindly been waiting for me to return before they started to kick off with any of their transfer decision making. But yeah, I am a little bit bored of just the moaning. It's a very Arsenal fan thing. There's a lot of moaning. Even when we get linked to players, there's moaning. Even though it looks like we might get deals done, there's moaning. I think that there has to be a real kind of take a step back, think about what Arsenal is in the market over the last few years, the proactiveness of Arsenal this month, the fact that, you know, we pretty much got 4 deals, at least 3, all but wrapped up, potentially a 4th with MOSQUERA, you know, before even we talk about being and going into July, is just very different. And I don't feel like that's getting enough, you know, credit, or it's not being talked about necessarily enough. And I get that the idea that we all want the forwards, the attacking players, but they are the really tough parts of the summer for Arsenal to complete. They're the complicated deals. They're the ones that are going to take time. And the other thing I'm a little bit exasperated with is the whole just pay the money, like that phrase. It's just pay what Sporting want, just pay what Leipzig want, just pay what these teams. Because the reality is that there's a contradiction, there's a hypocrisy. We want Arsenal to have the depth that we've been crying out for a long time. We don't want to be sitting there and being able to point fingers at injuries. We want to be able to point fingers at the manager if things go wrong, and they're not to be existential factors as to why we can't necessarily point the finger at Mikel Arteta. So when Arsenal are like going and negotiating and trying to get the best deal possible, it's so that they can then spend on others and, and get us even more players to help the cause moving forward. So yeah, that's what I'm a little bit exhausted with right now.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And where is that? North Bank Gooner just put something up. And I think I messaged, I don't know if we messaged about this, but to me, as much as it's so important, to bringing the new players, Tom, we also saw the new contracts for Big Gabby and Miles Lewis-Skelly.
Yeah.
The Miles Lewis-Skelly, I don't know if there's a photo, maybe other than Super Kev, that's been liked so much on the Highbury Squad community page than the one I posted of Miles Lewis-Skelly and his grandmother. The wholesomeness, everything about it. Also, his statement, which I know you've probably talked about on your show. This is the first show for me back, but I just wanted to mention it really quick because I love the statement. I love the little dig at humbleness. I thought it was mature. He just impresses me more and more. Every single time I see him, you could see that he's surrounded by love, by good people, the energy. I loved what the club did for him. This guy hit the ceiling. It's up to him. I truly believe with Miles Lewis-Skelly, how far he goes is up to him. Touch wood, he will stay injury-free. I think he could be better than Ashley Cole in that position. Yes, I said that out loud. He's a very special player. And then seeing Big Gabby sign as well, and the photo of him with Berta, and then seeing Miles Lewis-Skelly with Berta. We keep moaning year after year how we don't hold on to players, how we let clubs come in and get our best players. And here we are, two of the most important signings. There's two more to go, Saliba, Saka, of course. But it was a great backbone to what hopefully will be a good window, Tom.
Yeah, and there's more talks going on as well. Arsenal are continuing talks with Waneri over a new deal, Saliba, Saka, Martinelli, Trossard, considered to be also under negotiation. It's very proactive in what Arsenal are doing, and it's a breath of fresh air. I remember, me and you have gone through the years of our best players leaving and us struggling to renew our best players and keep them at the club. And, now that it happens, it's almost kind of just like, yeah, so that's what we're meant to do. And it's like, that's just not really the reality of football, to have been as consistent in those contract renewals as we have been. If Saka signs his new deal, that'll be his third contract renewal in the last, 5-6 years. Obviously, players like Lewis-Skelly, who had Real Madrid knocking on his door, because as what happens with players when they reach towards the end of their contract, they're at a certain level, Real Madrid come knocking these days. And he's turned that down in favour of staying at Arsenal, of course. He's got a fantastic group of people behind him, as I always say. His mum, of course, is being his agent. Marcia helped negotiate that deal for him with the club. And we've now got, we've spent 40-odd million quid on a player to play on that left-hand side in Calafiori. And we've got arguably a player that's come through that can be even better than him. So, yeah, it's great to have this stuff. And I do feel like it is, it's taken for granted, certainly.
Yeah, can be. I don't think Calafiori comes close. I don't. Maybe that's unfair because we haven't seen the best of Ricardo because of his injuries. But there's just something about a player when you see him play, and the way Miles Lewis-Skelly plays so fearless. And I bet Mikel just fell in love with that from day one. He probably, when he first saw him play, he's like, look at this kid. He probably shocked everybody. People knew he was talented, Tom, but the way he's played and adapted himself to the game mentally, as well as the fact that he's got this, technical, physical talent, is unreal. And what I love is this continual, and it's very easy to pick holes at the club at certain times, but this Haylen, this crop of Haylen, when you look at, and because you're there, you go to training, you cover the game. There's a young player who's in the academy. His name's Brando Bailey-Joseph, and he's being talked about a lot. And they've highlighted him and Max Dowman quite a bit on the academy socials as well. And the same thing with BBJ is he went to school with my nephew, and you could just tell when you were watching him play, like among all the talented kids, he just looked unbelievable, right? But his parents, his family, unbelievable, just salt of the earth, wonderful people. And you've seen it with Saka, you've seen it with Winnera, you see it with Lewis Skelly, you see it with Brando Bailey-Joseph as well. And I just think that the club deserve a little bit more credit when it comes to, it's very easy to get manipulated in this world, Tom.
Yeah. Misinformation. Right? Misinformation is and manipulation are the two biggest things that people, that we have to deal with. Like you highlighted North Bank Gooners, I think, comment earlier that the one that's in the chat box there is as another really good example. It's like we speak mistruths, into existence. This idea that that's not the case today when he talks about Arsenal not being good negotiators. Andrea Berta's just joined, and yet we've got this idea that there's conclusive statements that we can make, despite the fact, of course, that we've already negotiated potentially, or certainly 3, potentially now 4 deals before July. But there's just this idea that you just say something and it becomes truth when it's not. But that's why, as someone like Miles Lewis Skelly, to segue back to it, he's got such a mature head on his shoulders for such a young age, and that comes from the people that are, of course, around him as well.
Yeah, I'm stoked about that. So good stuff there. Let me just put this from James. The press doesn't help. The same news outlet could speak about the same potential transfer over 4 days with news bites mulling over, edging closer, held positive talks, terms agreed. Okay, we'll get to that.
yeah, happy to talk about.
I just wanted to put John's comment up. MLS decision making pretty good. As he matures, he'll get so much better. I remember how Gabriel improved so rapidly. Comparison. Do you remember when everyone was saying, yes, sell Big Gabby to Juve? And he was making mistakes here and there. I've learned a lot over the last couple of years to hold the mayo and the mustard. There's no doubt about that. I've got actually quite a nice one here for you. Diallo, Gooner Talk is one of the very best Arsenal fan channels out there. Go and support.
Thanks, man.
That nice, Tom.
It is nice.
Right, Tom, what's going on, right? Where should we start? Because why don't I start with the most boring one of all, okay? And that is the SESKO Saga. As I was writing, I was like, the SESKO Saga, and then, I'd worked on a couple of Star Wars movies, the franchise, the saga continues, and to me, this feels like it is kind of entering into a galaxy far, far away. And the more you feel like or you can touch and feel like what's happening, the farther away it gets. What is the reality? And by the way, I said on the post before the show, I was like, here we deal with feelings aren't facts. So I just want the Scotties to know that. But what is this? What the bloody hell's going on?
It's actually it's really simple, to be honest. Like I saw a comment earlier. It's like, Tom always comes across so condescending, and it's because I talk about this and this isn't a slight on you for asking me. It's just, and I get the frustration for fans, but in reality, it's actually so simple what's going on. Arsenal under Berta is a different animal in the transfer market in the way they operate. They sit down at the start or months prior to the window opening, and they'll have the positions that they want to strengthen in. Now, previously, what it was, Edu was more kind of linear in his approach. Yes, he had different kind of ideas about who could sign, but it was kind of one. Then if you can't get the one, pivot to the next, pivot and so on. Berta's so much more holistic in the way in which he does his work, whereas he'll be in negotiations, as we are using the centre forward as an example. Our preference, our number one is SESKO. We've known that. We've known that since 2024, when obviously we were keen on him at the beginning of that window. He's the one that we are most keen on joining. But the way that Andrea Berta works is that he likes to have several plates spinning it for a position. And so there'll be talks going on with a number of players. There would have been, inquiries made. There would have been feelers put out regarding kind of, what players want, what the club are looking for. And also, Arsenal will have their valuation for players, what they're willing to kind of go to. Now, Leipzig want 80 to 100 million is the very well reported now and very well understood kind of ballpark that Leipzig want. Benjamin Sesko is a very good young player, and I'll be, he's certainly my preference as to the centre forward I'd like to see come in this summer. And I think, you speak to a lot of people in and around the business, it's certainly that is also the kind of consensus is that Sesko would be the smarter choice of him and Gyökeres. And he's not worth 80 to 100 million euros. And if Arsenal pay over 80 million euros, I personally would have felt that, even though he's the guy I would choose, that they've overspent. It would also affect how Arsenal are in the rest of the market and how they might spend for other targets. We want to bring in 3 attackers. That's what Arsenal want to do this window. 3 potential attacking options: a striker, a wide player, and a potential versatile option, Eze. We may talk about him in a bit. That type of profile. So at the moment, we're in this period of the window, which is really early. Pre-season's not started. Players aren't even back, fully from, in some cases, their holidays. Some are coming back to training in just over a week or so. And there is no, other than the desperation for Arsenal to, of course, get those centre forwards done kind of before pre-season mainly, which, of course, starts on the 23rd. That's our first proper game. It's this idea that you go and just pay the money that I think is frustrating a lot of people. Just go and pay what Leipzig want and get the player through the door. Arsenal aren't going to do that. Arsenal are in a strong position. They've got multiple options because this window isn't giving us the Declan Rice of centre forwards. Isaac is not available to us. And so therefore we are open to discussing with Sesko and Gyökeres and Ekitike and potentially Watkins and other potential options as well that maybe we're not even thinking or knowing about right now. So, it's just the reality of a negotiation. And while that's on the back burner, it's not like he's sitting on his hands, because he's going and getting 4 other deals done while we, play the longer game with this negotiation with the bigger deals.
Tom, I'm not blowing kisses at you, by the way. I'm blowing kisses to the squaddies. We've missed each other. So I did hear one of your shows where you talked about that they're coming down on the price. So you met, was it 60? Am I speaking out of turn? Was it 60 million?
So again, this is another great example of kind of how aggregation can spread misinformation, as we were talking about. Bild in Germany did a story, which was an opinion piece that basically described the idea that it's their information that eventually, after a protracted negotiation, Leipzig may come down on their price to around 70 million euros plus add-ons. So it's an opinion of Bild based upon the information they've collected that they will eventually accept something around that. Now, that got twisted by loads of people online to say Leipzig have lowered their price tag, and that's not where we're at with Sesko.
Right.
Hopefully it will get there, but right now that's not where we're at. So that's that one.
Okay. It's funny, isn't it? Because a player like him, 80 to 100, every transfer is a risk. Clearly, I do feel there's a huge upside with Sesko, age-wise, versatility, that height, his prowess in the air. He just seems to have the whole package. I know there were rumors about he was asking for a release clause, and some people got irked about that. And I'm thinking, if I'm a, potential, world beater type striker, I would put all sorts of things in a contract to protect myself. That's, it's like when you marry someone really wealthy, or you don't, have a prenup if you want to protect the things that matter to you most.
I don't think that's true, by the way, the release clause thing.
Was it? I was okay.
Again, that was another thing that was kind of said, but to my knowledge, that's not the case.
Right. Is this the one? I don't really want to talk about Gyökeres, to be honest, because I've never felt that Gyökeres was a reality for Arsenal. And maybe I'm talking out on my backside. I know that there's stories about Berta being a fan, and he's now, it's contentious between him and Sporting. And I'm not sure if we want to get into that type of mess, and players holding clubs to ransom, etc., etc. Arsenal fans divided as to whether or not Sesko or Gyökeres is the right one. 350 of you in live chat. Let me know what you think. And if you've got a question for Tom, throw a Q in front of it. We'll make him work and hustle for a little bit for the last 15 minutes of the show. Tom, is it a reality, the Gyökeres thing?
It could be, but again, it's quite similar to the SESKO one because Sporting's president changed, and what we are hearing is that there was kind of a gentleman's agreement between Sporting and the former president and Gyökeres that he could leave this summer for 60 million euros plus 10 million in add-ons. The new Sporting president's come in and basically said that that's never going to happen. He's too good to let go for that amount of money. Now, I think that's a pretty reasonable price, to be honest, for Gyökeres, for a player of that age in the Portuguese league. I think that's a pretty reasonable price tag. But they're not expecting the release clause. He has a 100 million euro release clause. They're not expecting that. But again, similar to Leipzig, they are holding firm on evaluation that at the moment Arsenal are not at, and there's not a middle point between either club. So he definitely wants the move to Arsenal. So does SESKO, by the way. There's a lot been made kind of about SESKO and not wanting XYZ. If Arsenal agree a deal with Leipzig, there won't be any issue, to my understanding, regarding SESKO and kind of joining Arsenal. I'd be very, very happy to join Arsenal if they can come to an agreement on a deal. So, yeah, it's club-to-club stuff on both sides. But both of them still, I genuinely am 50-50 on which of them will come right now. I have my own preference, but I'm really 50-50 on which one it will be.
Okay. I don't have a picture of him, unfortunately, and I'm sure I bastardized his name. You're the one that teaches me how to pronounce it. Ekatike?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Rumored to be the backup guy. A little bit like. Listen, I'm not saying that Ben Jacobs is SESKO and you're Ekatike. But it kind of happened tonight.
It did. Yeah, I'll take that.
I'm not going to lie, Tom. I love to learn, and I'm sure we'll have an expert on the show to talk about him should things get interesting. I really don't know too much about this player.
Yeah, he's not a centre forward like SESKO and Gyökeres are in that kind of more traditional sense. He's certainly a lot more collaborative, false nine, can drop in, can play wide. Very technical player, hasn't got the same kind of level of goal scoring as the other two do in terms of kind of goal per game, goal per minute and stuff like that. It's not as frequent, but he is still very talented, and he's certainly been up there amongst players that I've talked about on TGT before about being open to the idea of having seen a lot more of him in the last 6 months. That said, while certainly Arsenal would have watched him and will be aware of him and having scouted him, I've not heard anything to suggest that there's kind of in the same way that Gyökeres and SESKO are kind of being pursued, there's not that same energy right now for Ekatike to what I know. But that can change very quickly if suddenly they, Frankfurt soften their stance, because as far as I know, Frankfurt also want a very, very big fee as well. So I think they'd be in the same boat if they wanted to pursue that potential option. But they're not, to my knowledge, they're not actively on that case right now.
Okay. I'm going to leave the best till last because Albert's in the chat and he's having kittens about a certain player, and I think you probably know which one.
Yeah, he sent me a voice note about it.
and a lot of Arsenal fans are. Okay, unpopular opinion by me, but my good friend Natalie Sawyer, who has been on this show a few times, where we have talked about Brentford. And there was a time where I kind of joked with her about players I wanted to pinch. And one of the things I want to say and preface is we have for so long talked about how our bench is weak, right? Or our squad isn't big enough, and that we don't have preparedness when it comes to injuries. Now, there were times last season, Tom, where our bench looked woeful and scary and dangerous for all the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I always felt like when I looked at Liverpool, even with their 5 up front, sure, Darwin Núñez never hit the ground running. He still was able to come on and play and be part of a game. Luis Diaz. You look at Manchester City. I mean, even Chelsea, they've got a massive squad. And for us, it just felt like we'd let ourselves down at times, because not only did we not have, you can't have like for like across the pitch, but there wasn't even like for some like. And when I heard about the signing of Norgard, I was like, yes. I banged the table and I said, about time, right? Because here's the scoop. Thomas Partey leaving, Jorginho leaving. That's two really super experienced players in the Premier League. And also two very good players for different reasons. Norgard, for me, and when we spoke to Natalie, she loves this player. And I don't know if you've heard her talk about him on TalkSport, but she wanted to teach some Arsenal fans a little bit of a lesson where she spoke about his professionalism. Statistically, I hope Arsenal fans go and check this guy's stats and what he offers. You know, Natalie also talked about how he really is an instigator in starting their attack from the back. I know there's one stat that he doesn't shine so great in, and I'm not sure if that's is that the final ball, Tom? Maybe you can correct me.
No, I've got a load of stats to hand because I wrote a piece on both him and Partey today. Like, I don't really get where the whole final ball thing's coming from looking at the stats. So yeah,
right, all right. So and just to wrap up on him, leadership, captain, quality can come in. Will play in those games where, you know, sometimes fans are like, why is he playing Declan Rice against, you know, Burnley? I mean, why is he playing against? These are options. In fact, I would argue that I would like the club to sign 4 more Norgards. I want the star players, but I would like us to sign 4 more Norgards. Tom, your take on him? You've just written a piece. Is that going out tomorrow, or did that go out
It's
today?
out now. You can read it on the Football on the website. It's called "Why Thomas Partey is Leaving" as Mikel Arteta and Andrea Berta transfer plan explained. Kind of looking at the reasons behind why kind of Arsenal are not meeting the demands of Partey's kind of contracts negotiations, and why Norgard is as well. You know, a very astute piece of business by the club. And I, like you, when I saw the link come up, it surprised me at first because obviously he's not a name that's been mentioned a lot. I was aware that a couple of years ago the club had kind of that they'd looked at him, you know, and certainly they have watched him and he has been appreciated for a while. He's not been a player that they've actively targeted, but he's a player that you know has been on their radar certainly for a little while. And that's why Arteta was very keen on him being the player over, say, a Lucien Agume, who was also linked from Sevilla, a younger player, younger profile player, being the guy that comes in to be, you know, the Jorginho replacement for next season, while Zubimendi becomes the Partey replacement for next season. So, yeah, I like him as a player. I think he's very consistent, as you pointed out. His off-field stuff's brilliant. His leadership on the field is also really good. He's been captain of Brentford for a little while. So, you know, that's really strong. The deal itself, you know, the money that we're paying is negligible. You know, it's a really, really good deal for Arsenal. And you know, I think when you look at kind of the decision not to renew Partey, you know, part of the reason is kind of what I've noticed over the last, you know, few seasons is a decline. I think last season was one of his best. Don't get me wrong, but that was more associated with the fact that he was fit, which has not been something we've seen from Partey, you know, consistently enough. But even though we had that. And one of the biggest things, and as you pointed out, you kind of asked about what's the kind of thing that people are griping about. It's more to do with kind of like, yeah, his progression, Norgard's progression as a player. Is it as strong as what Partey's is? Well, Partey's passes into the final third per 90 have declined every season for the last 3 years. In 22-23, it was 8.37. The season after that, it was 6.93. And last season, it was 5.4. So he's completing nearly 3 less passes into the final third per game than he was 2 seasons before last season. His pass completion was down last season on the season before that. His attempted passes per game was down. His shot creating actions were down. His blocks per 90 are down. His interceptions are down. His tackles lost are up. And defensive errors went from 0 in 23-24 to 4 last season. And this is a player that's turning 32, you know, and obviously then injuries associated with players that have had a history of them going into that kind of age bracket also goes up. Well, you compare that to Norgard. In his last 3 seasons, while his passes into the final third aren't at the moment of that level of Partey, bear in mind he plays for Brentford as opposed to Arsenal, they've gone up every season for the last 3 years. They went from 3.47 to 4.06 to 4.38. So they're going up, they're trending upwards, despite the fact there's this claim, well, Norgard's 31, so how can you give a contract to him and not Partey? Well, his numbers are going up in that regard. He's also lost fewer tackles. He's made more successful tacklers on dribblers per 90. He's made more clearances, scored more goals, created more goals for teammates. So this idea that, you're just signing a player that's 1 year apart from Partey. I don't really get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the stats. And I do believe that when it's a signing like him, it's important to look at the data. You know me and numbers and data. I don't really like it too much. But when it comes to a signing like him, and come on, was it Come On You Arsenal? Or someone said, come on, Soph, he's a bench player. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want 4 more like him. I'm not rooting for Jorginho, the 12 million that we spent. I don't care what anyone says. That was money well spent. He was a really good signing for us. He came up in big moments. Like Norgard at the price in this day and age. And by the way, he's a super fit guy, Tom.
Yeah, there's misconceptions about his injury record. The number of games he's missed has also decreased over the last 3 years, 4 years even. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm happy about him. Before we move on to the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle and some questions for you, which will tie in with that, is I'd like a little detail on Mr. Mosquera. And by the way, I did spell Christian wrong and had to edit earlier today.
I'm fuming about this. We're signing 2 Christians and they're not spelt the same. It's going to be a nightmare if we're typing minute-by-minute commentaries next season.
Another player, Tom, that I know of, that I have seen play. I don't know the in-depths. Is he more a Big Gabby? Is he more a Saliba? I'm going to learn a little bit from you right now. What I do know is that he's a player that is very, very well sought after. Seems to have that build, that elegance, but also could look like a bruiser. Talk to me about Mosquera. Apparently we've agreed terms. And by the way, kids, you know that doesn't mean that a deal's been done. To me, this seems like preparation for maybe an exit of one of the two, but at the same time, a player that can come in and contribute greatly and, again, allow Mikel the ability to rotate.
Yeah, I think the idea of someone leaving in the future, because Mosquera's coming out, that it's more so kind of like damage control in worst case scenario. But the priority why we've signed him is because on the right-hand side that we have lacked some depth. There isn't a obvious number 2 like Kivior is for Gabriel for Saliba. He doesn't have an out and out. You've got Ben White and Timber who can both play there, but they are right backs. Tomiyasu is never fit and available, even though if he was, he would be a real asset to us. And so bringing in Mosquera, who is a ball playing, physically imposing, quick centre half, still with, he's got rough edges, and he's only 21 years of age, so that's not particularly surprising. Saliba had rough edges still to a degree at the age that Mosquera is now, and that hopefully can be refined. But yeah, it's a really cheap deal because he's only got a year left on his contract. Arsenal are looking to kind of do a real around £20 million. I think it could end up looking close to. So again, it's not a deal for a defender like a Yoral Hato, for instance, would have been, that would have taken up a huge chunk of your budget. So yeah, there's a reason he's not going to be a starter for Arsenal. But he is a player that comes in and adds depth and adds potential and adds, it will add quality in the short and long term.
Who is he most comparable to?
I think he's got bits of both of Gabriel and Saliba, to be honest. He's got that physical presence of, to be fair, like Saliba we think of more as kind of the on-the-ball, very confident, can turn a player inside out, whereas Gabriel, you're bruising centre-half that's a threat in the box that's, still got pace about him and a really decent technical pass on him. But, I think that with Mosquera, he's the closest that you can probably get to getting kind of a similar ilk at a younger age that's got those rough edges to come through. So we're getting a very similar profile. Like Kivior is not like those two. Kivior is a different type of centre-half. Has got good passing qualities in particular, but lacks kind of that physical side and the speed side of his game, the athletic side of his game, whereas Mosquera has that athletic side of his game that both Gabriel and Saliba have. So, he will offer us that. He's also very comfortable playing on the left and on the right of the back too. So that's another benefit of him coming in. He's also played at right back a few times for Valencia. So we know Arteta loves playing players at right back who don't tend to play there. So he's also done that, which maybe of
don't start that. Okay, also great. I find him an interesting prospect. And you mentioned Kivior. I hope Kivior stays. My biggest apology last season went to Kivior, and there's a player that deserves his flowers and proved you know, that he can step up and step in when you're looking at like 6, 7, 8 games needed, not starter every week. But this is how, again, Kivior is a Nordgaard. I was going to say Nordegaard. It's going to be a problem, Tom.
Isn't it? I don't think there's a D in it.
Yeah, I don't think there's a D in it. I'm just making it up as I go along.
Obviously, but yeah.
But like the Kiviors, the Mosqueras, he wouldn't be a loan back, would he, Mosquera? We wouldn't do that. He's not that type of.
He would come in and
be
in. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's put Albert out of his misery. Today, news about, you know, connecting, talking, chatting. What are the buzzwords? Eze. Lots of teams interested in Eze. A superstar little player in the making. Has had quite the journey as well. Player that, again, temperament, paid his dues as well. Has had nothing handed to him. Love this player. Arsenal fans absolutely love this guy. I don't think I've heard an Arsenal fan, Tom, that wouldn't be interested in bringing Eze to the Emirates. What's going on here? Spurs, of course, have been interested in him for a while as well. What's the scoop?
Yeah, I think if you searched hard enough, you'd still find someone moaning about it, probably. But I agree with you. I think this is a great signing if Arsenal could pull it off. You know, I hear there's obviously Arsenal are interested in a lot of players, you know, going into summer windows, and you'll hear a lot of names. And I won't say, you know, I won't put it into a piece because it's just kind of an offhand thing. But in May, I'd heard from like a couple of people that Eze was like a genuine player they were really going to be considering this summer as one of the top potential targets for those attacking options. And so I wrote a piece on it. I'm quite grateful to have written it now, you know, looking back at that piece in May that I put out that Arsenal were interested in Eze, because he wasn't really at that time someone that, you know, was really out there being discussed. And so the piece went out, and then it's been, you know, a month, just over that. And it is now that Arsenal have kind of really stepped up in that field. The reports, of course, from initially Fabrizio Romano and then others this past weekend, discussions took place with the players' camp. Ed Aarons of The Guardian, who's got very good connections at Crystal Palace, is a big Crystal Palace fan. He was at the playoff final, but he covers Arsenal a lot for The Guardian, but he's also put out that Arsenal met with the players' representatives to discuss a potential transfer. They've not opened talks with Palace yet, but there's a good reason why they haven't. You know, there is a release clause in that contract that, to my knowledge, Palace would be expecting if Arsenal was going in. That's £67.5 million in his contract. It can be paid. I think it doesn't have to be paid all up front, which is obviously something you typically associate release clauses, particularly in Spain. But this one doesn't have to be paid, to my knowledge, all as one go. So it could be done quite feasibly by Arsenal. But they still, obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if they went to Palace and tried to negotiate a better fee. But it's unlikely they'll be able to do it, especially if other clubs are interested in him as well. So, yeah, it's without a doubt a player that I'd love to see come in at Arsenal. I think would be a real marquee addition, you know, a proper statement signing, one of the best players in the Premier League over the last few years. So, yeah, I'd love to see Eze come to Arsenal. That'd be great. Someone
just put up, where is it? BX Gunner. Eze's exciting, but numbers-wise, not that much better. Is that...
Told you. You search someone up. Search hard enough. There will be someone.
I don't think he's BX is usually good though about this kind of stuff. He says he's exciting, but numbers wise,
well, I mean, he's got 25 goal contributions this season in 43 games. So you're averaging either a goal or an assist faster than one every other game for Crystal Palace, who finish on the average of 12th over the last 5 seasons. So he scored in the cup final against City. He scores in big games. Scored against us at the Emirates. You know, what can you say? If that's not exciting, I don't know what's exciting. I really don't.
All right, here come the questions for you, Tom. We'll do a few minutes here of questions with Tom. If you have one, put a Q in front of it and we'll ask him. Wesbird says, I think Eze would be a great addition, but where is his best position, and would signing him have an impact on how we played?
Obviously, we kind of put players into specific holes and we think about formations on paper. I think Eze's best position is when he's given freedom to play his best game in kind of an attacking role. You don't have to say it's a 10 or a left 8 or a left wide playmaker. If he's given freedom to express, if he's got freedom to work, like at the end of the day, he will perform for Arsenal. If you're putting him in a team with Ødegaard, a centre forward, and Saka, naturally he'll kind of skew to the left, but you'll see him, moving centrally. You'll see him combining probably even still with Saka on the right. So he would offer a lot of additions of quality to a number of roles. But I think, as I say, he's best when he's got that freedom, when he works centrally. He can be very devastating, but that doesn't mean you have to start him in a central position, because he will work his way into that position from those wider roles as well. So, yeah, I think that he can play with Ødegaard very comfortably. I think he'd play instead of Ødegaard if we ever needed to do that. He could play on the left. He could play, as a second centre forward, like a second striker, just behind the number 9. So, yeah, I think that he'll have loads of freedom at Arsenal if he was to join as well.
A lot of Dean Mallon and a few others. Could Arsenal sign Rodrigo and Eze? I mean, it seems like, and you've got a lot of questions as well, by the way. You could do these two together. Why can't we sign SESKO and GoonerChris? I mean, Rodrigo seems like he would be in the Declan Rice bracket fee wise. Tom, what's your say on those two?
Well, this is why Arsenal are negotiating still about SESKO and GoonerChris, because if they can get, really solid agreements with those clubs for a more reasonable figure, it means that if, say, a Rodrigo emerges as a potential option later on in the window, they wouldn't be cut off because of any financial regulatory restrictions that would be on them. It's not a case of they couldn't afford to do it. They could. But Arsenal always want to work within the confines of those restrictions. That's just how they operate. They also want to be self-sustaining. So the idea of signing a striker, Eze and Rodrigo, is not an impossibility. I'm not going to sit here and say that's like you're playing FIFA, because it's not. It could actually happen. But because Arsenal want to sign 3, attacking players this window. So I hope that happens. If that happens, it would be great. It would firmly cement Arsenal as, absolutely one of the favourites next season. So even without those 3, if we would sign 2 of those 3, I think Arsenal would still very much up there, in contention with Liverpool and City. But to sign all 3 of them would be a real statement by the club.
There you go, James. He's answered your question too for you there. But I mean, when you look at Liverpool signings, I mean, Wirtz, of course, a record signing, Frimpong, is it GoonerChris they've signed? Yeah.
GoonerChris, yeah. And they want Guehi as well.
Yeah, but they don't want to pay. Palace are asking like 50 million for him.
Yeah, but they still might pay that. It wouldn't be surprised me if Guehi goes there this summer.
So that kind of window, we would need. I mean, with Wirtz, it's got to be Rodrigo, right? If we're comparing apples to apples, Frimpong, would you say? I mean, I'm not talking positionally. I'm talking like that level talent. Is that SESKO? Or no? Is he more proven?
Maybe more so than Frimpong's done exceptionally well in the Bundesliga for Bayer Leverkusen. The interesting thing about him is that obviously he's been playing predominantly as kind of a wing back, which is not the role that Trent Alexander-Arnold has been playing. So I'll be interested to see how he's used at Liverpool, Frimpong, because he's very offensive, could leave gaps in behind. I've liked him for a while. I remember writing pieces about him when he was at Celtic. So I really did see him as maybe someone that could offer the Premier League some excitement. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see kind of his role at Liverpool next season. But he's a good player. I think if we're talking about how he ranks in terms of wing backs as opposed to how SESKO ranks as a centre forward, he ranks higher for me, Frimpong. So.
O'Malley, I think Tom answered this one. Doesn't it feel like we need 3 attackers to be complete? Striker, left wing for sure, but we need another attacking mid or right wing.
And the club thinks so.
One from Albert JTV. Tom, what are your thoughts on Lookman?
I like him, but I'm not. He's kind of in the bracket of players like Leao and Nico Williams, who, if we sign him, how much of an improvement is he on what we already have? And I'm not sure if he is. I'm happy to bring in the centre forward that's not necessarily a massive up, because I don't think GoonerChris or SESKO is a massive upgrade on Havertz at all. I think it's got the capacity to be, but immediately I don't think so. But on the left-hand side, when you've already got two wingers, I think if we go for that wide player or a player that can play in that role, they need to be that statement needle pusher, like an Eze, like a Rodrigo. So I like Lookman, but I'm not sure if he's the requisite level, but I think he would certainly add to the team.
I think I said to you before, maybe when with Harry, there's just something about him that seems like a one-season wonder type player.
Well,
maybe that's...
He's done a few, 2 or 3 seasons have been pretty good at Atalanta. I think a lot of people associate the fact that he played in the Premier League, obviously with Leicester, Fulham, I think as well, like Everton.
Everton, yeah.
It's not gone. It didn't go like amazing then, but some players develop later, and what he's done at Atalanta is great. Hat-trick in the Europa League final.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to take that away from him. From Shane, and this was something we were going to talk to Ben Jacobs about, because Ben, who has very close ties to, and by the way, those who are tuning in late, Ben wasn't feeling tip-top and he's covering the City game tonight, but he'll be back on the show on Thursday. So Tom stepped in last minute, like the super sub that he is, off the bench, absolutely smashing it. There were stories about linking Martinelli to Saudi if Luis Diaz wasn't going to go. And Shane asks if there are 3 forwards coming. Do you think one of Gabby or Trossard leaves? Trossard, has that deal been signed, Tom?
No, not yet. And it's not like a widespread. I think it's kind of the Mail's reported about that Trossard like contract negotiation. I think Arsenal will be aware of, the length, and he'll certainly feel that he has earned an improvement in his terms since signing for the club, his contributions. But I think either of them could go only if Arsenal get an offer that they think is, silly to say no to. It would have to be one of those types. And Saudi is usually a place where those offers can come from. So, yeah, I certainly think that there's the possibility that either one of them could go. But even if they stay, for me, Arsenal need to go for 3 forward signings. So we need to add, not replace in this window. It's all about adding and, giving Arteta as much as he can, so that we can point at him, not the players or the market or the injuries. Yeah, I want to be able to I completely
agree with you. We have a thin squad as it is. So for me, it's definitely, I'm not ready to part with Martinelli yet. I don't know why. Maybe... Oh, Mark, you're so funny. When we're talking about Nordgaard, he goes, does he use...
Nordgaard VPN.
Very good. Okay, a few more for you here, Tom. You've got a few more minutes, right? Okay. Where is it? There's one about Waneri, and I want to make sure I'll ask you the question and I'll put it up when I find it. But someone was asking, and a few of the squaddies have asked, with these names coming in, and we saw Waneri kind of fade out towards the end of last season, didn't come on until the 86th minute against PSG. What's your take on Waneri? What does your ear to the ground say?
Well, I mean, the club are in contract talks with him. He played, I think, over 40 appearances last season as an 18-year-old for Arsenal. He double-checked the numbers. No, nearly 40, 37 appearances for Arsenal, 9 goals, 2 assists. At 18 years of age. That's a great return for a player. I know there's this swell of, excitement about what Miles Lewis-Skelly has done, but that's not normal. What Lewis-Skelly has done is not normal. What potentially we could see from Max Dowman next season, is also another element. Having 2 players come into the team that are competing for titles and doing what they're doing is not normal. Getting to the semi-final of the Champions League, starting in the Bernabeu, as Lewis-Skelly did, is not normal for a player in their first season at 18 years of age. Waneri needs to just carry on what he's doing. I know that people feel that Arteta snubbed him a lot at the end of the season, but that was the season where he'd made really his proper breakthrough. He got an injury in January that saw him miss for 3-4 weeks that I think, came as a bit of a surprise to him and the club as well. So they want to be conscious of that. If you run these players into the ground at such an early stage of their career, it's really it's gonna damage them. So I think they were just being cautious with him, and I think we'll see him plenty next season. I think we'll see loads of him next season.
Also, I have this fear that Arsenal fans, much like this season when they were screaming for Waneri to play at certain times, I did it with Martinelli a few years ago. Kev used to tell me to calm down. And I have since, actually, a fair bit.
I remember telling Potsy to calm down about Martinelli loads. Like
me and Potsy.
Played loads.
I have a feeling the same thing's going to happen with Max. Fans are going to expect him to, and it's just not going to be that way.
And for the record, Arteta's at fault as much as anyone else with that, because he's brought him up. Like I've asked him about the attacking midfield position and if he wants depth there, and he unprompted has brought up Max's name. Like, so if they want to dial down the expectation, Arteta's not really helping on that front.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's good that he's excited about him. I guess that's this is an interesting one from BX Gunner. Are we being held back in the market by having Havertz and Jesus on the highest wages? I mean, for me, Havertz is part of the squad and he's integral to the squad. Jesus, that's a whole other conversation. Hardly plays, and we're paying him a fortune.
He's injured. Like he's suffered his second knee injury since being it. You can't lower a player's wages, and had he been fit, he probably would have been sold this summer as well. So, the Havertz one is always a moot point with me. He was on massive wages at Chelsea. He was making a big £65 million switch. His wages were going to go up if the club were going to get him. So they did. And he's a good player. Like, I really don't get the Havertz discourse these days. Like, he's proven people wrong time and time again. He's scored in big games. He's consistently scored, and he's contributed in a big way. And, it sucks that we missed him in the second half of this season, because he really would have been valuable for us.
Here's one from Demsek. Could the striker take till the end of the window? Tom loosely mentioned at the beginning some of the bigger signings. They do take a little bit more time. Wouldn't surprise me, Tom.
It could. It's certainly not what Arsenal want. They want the striker signing done ideally before pre-season. So it might be that in this fortnight, just over a fortnight, 3 weeks, we've got until just under 3 weeks before they fly off to Asia. We could have a breakthrough, in discussions over this. And look, learn from last week how quickly things can accelerate in such a small amount of time. One day, Zubimendi's in chatting with Real Madrid on the phone. The next day, Arsenal have locked up 3 players before the end of June, potentially a 4th as well. So, just chill out. just chill on that front.
I sent, when I was in Cyprus, I sent Tom a message. I was
man, you made my... That message that sparked me going down a real rabbit hole of phone calls about Zubi ruined my pre-holiday.
It was the day before you were leaving, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I rang a couple of contacts of mine the night before I was leaving, and then in the morning I was at Heathrow Airport making phone calls about Zubimendi, and then from a very good contact of mine, who's got very good connections at Arsenal in particular, was like, well, yeah, I'm not going to say they haven't called him, and I'm sitting there right, okay, so yeah, and so I basically got to the end of the point where I basically got it confirmed that a call had been made, and it wasn't as far along as what obviously you'd said with me previously, like what the person had said to you, but nowhere near that level, in fact, but there was definitely contact, and so that's why I did a little bit of a drop a grenade before leaving for holiday article, and I got so much stick for that article as well.
On a 10-hour flight.
I got so much stick for that piece, and I was real panicking about that piece. Not it going out. I was panicking because I was like, I've got this info. I need to get it out. I'm refreshing my timeline, waiting to see if anyone else gets there before I do, because that's what you do these days. It's there's such a pressure, and I don't tend to break stuff too often. It's been nice getting to the EZE stuff in May. It's been nice doing that story, but there is a real anxiousness about whenever you post kind of big info at that time.
Sure.
And obviously because it's not positive news, and if it's not positive, you get pelters for it, regardless of whatever it is. So suggesting that Real Madrid had indeed made a call and had tried to convince Zubi, and that and even though I put underneath the story, This, for the record, would be a major shock if Real Madrid somehow did, because the deal with Arsenal was so advanced, like legality reasons, like legally it would have been a question mark if something had happened. So, yeah, as soon as I put that out, I got so much stick, even though it was the truth. Like, it's just a funny world. It is what it is.
And I love the squaddies, and I know you with your listeners too. I want them to know, like, behind the scenes, the chaos. I mean, they had David Ornstein on this show, and Ben Jacobs did a really good piece last time he was on, taking them through the step by step, and Sammy MOSQUERA, who, by the way, also said the same thing as you. If this deal doesn't happen, it will be like gargantuanly mental when it comes to Zubi. The reason why I said something to you is because the source was like major. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know who. Obviously, you told me the source. Like, that's I can't believe how inaccurate it was based upon.
I know.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. That's why it's you guys think, you were dotting your I's and crossing your T's and not getting this wrong, and sometimes you think you can get something so right, and a player can change his mind, an agent can persuade a player to change his mind, and you can give all the guarantees, but nothing's for sure. But yeah, that was really quite an interesting one. All right, let's give Tom a couple more. There's an interesting one here. I like this question. If neither SESKO or GoonerChris come to FC, no, wait, hold on on this one. I wanted to. No, it's not that one. But you can ask. I mean, who would be? Who would be
the one that they're looking
Watkins?
at? Not that they're looking at. Watkins is the one that, like, they've still got tabs on. Watkins would join Arsenal like that. Like, he'd be very, very happy to join Arsenal. He was
is it Man United are looking at him, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's a fair few clubs that I spoke to a contact of mine in January when the deal obviously didn't happen, and I'd heard that he was gutted. That it didn't go through. I think there was a sense that, like, with his age as well, like 29, this was the last chance he could get. To get a move. I think he was gutted that it didn't materialise, because he would have been delighted to sign for Arsenal. But yeah, tricky one.
All right. Okay. That's Ollie Watkins for you. Right. Here's the question. It's from Diallo, and it's an interesting one. Tom, if we sign both Rodrigo and Eze, then which striker makes the most sense in that specific scenario? Or let's just say we sign Rodrigo. Seems far-fetched now to me, Tom.
Yeah.
At first I was like, maybe.
Yeah. Well, how we've been talking about all these players, like GoonerChris would love to join Arsenal. SESKO would be delighted to join Arsenal. Eze would take, as far as I'm aware, he wants the move to Arsenal. And would all these players we're being linked to, Norgard, who of course is coming in, MOSQUERA, personal terms, not a problem. The difference between all that and Rodrigo is that I don't see a world where he'd rather be at Arsenal than Real Madrid right now. I know his minutes have diminished and gone down, but there's no indications at the moment that, like, he's like pushing to leave and is well up for this Arsenal move. So that's the issue I've got on kind of the Rodrigo one. He definitely is a player the club really like. He's definitely the player that the club would jump on the opportunity to sign if it emerges. But it's a different scenario. And so if there is one deal that would go Mesut Ozil style right to the end of the window, I don't know, there's obviously a lot of links with Real Madrid, that is the one. It would be if the opportunity becomes available, then he'll move. And people shouldn't get tied up in the whole, well, if he doesn't want Arsenal, we shouldn't go for him, because there's been players that have been indifferent and a little bit torn about joining Arsenal themselves. And yet a couple of years spent at the club, they fall in love with it. They fall in love with the fan base, the club, the coaches, the match day experience. They fall in love with it. So if they're indifferent about joining, that love for Arsenal grows. So I'm not too fussed about the fact that he isn't, at this moment, desperate like others are to join Arsenal, because he's already at Real Madrid. So, it's difficult to ask that.
This is so funny. You guys are so funny, Roy. Should we worry in 3 years when Real Madrid flirt with SESKO as an Mbappe replacement? I mean, you guys are hilarious sometimes.
You heard it here first. Roy's on it. Roy's got sources.
It's too funny. Okay, here's one for you. Let's see. John asks, Mavroudis, fellow Greek, How much are relying on the player to pressure the club? How much are who? Anyway, I think you know what he's saying. Is there a danger in that, as opposed to putting the pressure on with raising the stakes ourselves? How much? I think he's talking about how much pressure are we putting on the player versus the player on the club.
Well, I think the question is obviously like about, do we require kind of the players to go to the club and be like, look, you need to let me leave. You have to accept a lower offer. Like Arsenal aren't going to come back with a bigger offer. You need to accept a lower one. At the end of the day, they're under contract, and a player under contract is the club's player, and there's nothing much more you can do about that. Sometimes it can help. In the case of Norgard, Arsenal have got a really good deal because Norgard gave them many years of service, and they have, even though he signed a contract in March for a reasonable price, which we're paying, they've sanctioned the deal. Respect really for Norgard and the opportunity that's afforded him. But in the case of Sporting and Leipzig, it doesn't matter how much SESKO or Gyökeres want to push. I think both those clubs are very firm on what they're expecting in terms of a price tag, and it's going to be very difficult based upon their own track records of selling players. Leipzig and Sporting have sold plenty of high-profile players in the past, So, it's going to be difficult. So Arsenal might need a little bit of help, sure, but I don't know how much of an impact that will make.
Okay. All right. We've got a few more minutes here. Let's get this one. This is actually quite funny. Sophie, please ask Tom how come every business started to kick off only after he came back. The rumors are that he has connections inside the club. That brown envelope, Tom, I'm telling you, just gets fatter and fatter every single time.
The brown envelope. Oh, dear.
This is funny. Guy and Prosper finally caught the show. My issues in this whole SESKO debacle. We should have been closed and done or moved on. This has Daily Duzan all over it. We need a 9, and it's true. It's
not even July. And these fans are like, should have moved on. He don't want to come. Move on.
It does have Duzan Vlahovic vibes about it.
January. We only had a month to do that deal.
That's true.
I get it if it was January, but we got September, as you said earlier.
And NK, I think Tom said SESKO. He's made it clear that SESKO is his guy. Let's see, Stavros, another Greek. I'm telling you, we're everywhere. Tom, who do Arsenal consider as representing good for value, value for money in the striker department? Seems Gyökeres, SESKO, and Ekitike are overpriced in Arsenal's books. Basically, Stavros asking, are we going to end up with Ollie Watkins?
Well, even then, like we bid 40 million plus, I think around 5 million in add-ons. Certainly 40 million plus add-ons. And I thought that was too much, to be honest. Like, that was a record deal, by the way. Had that have happened, he would have become the most expensive 29-year-old striker to move from one Premier League club to another, had Arsenal agreed that deal with them. So that tells you kind of in context how big that offer was for Watkins. But I don't think that was necessarily value for money. And I didn't want that deal to happen. People say, oh, Tom, you're always defending Arsenal, whatever they do. I thought that was a mistake. I really didn't want him to do that deal. I didn't want him to renew Partey's contract when they started, in discussions with him either. I don't agree with everything that they do. I just think that this market for centre forwards isn't great. Again, even though we have to sign one, it's just still not the best as it has been in the past. But I felt that way when Isak was leaving Real Sociedad, and I see a lot of similarities between SESKO and Isak from when he was at Sociedad, and a lot of the numbers are very similar as well. And that kind of protracts that extrapolation of numbers is part of the reason why I think he's a smarter deal. So, yeah, if you get him for a good price, like if you manage to get SESKO for 60 plus 10 and got him for 70 million euros, I think that's either Gyökeres or SESKO for 60 plus 10 million euros, I think is a fine piece of business by Arsenal. But neither of those clubs want to do business at that value, and that's the issue.
Yeah. I had Elliot on a couple of weeks ago. We're having everyone, do this rogue versus real, where everyone gets to pick like a few rogue players in the squad. And it wasn't necessarily like, for me, when we're talking about this and we're going over these players, Tom, and stuff like that, I think he's a game changer, right? I'm not saying, I think Eze is better than, he's better than, He can deputise for Martin Odegaard. He's not better than Martin Odegaard, in my opinion, but is he better than Martinelli and Trossard? You could argue maybe yes. I mean, he's played for Crystal Palace, shines in a team that doesn't have, super talent. But to me, when we're talking about getting across the line, having the Vert signing, the Liverpool infusion on top of what they did and have last season, to me, he's a game-changing signing, Rodrigo. This guy takes us over the edge. When you think about a front three, Rodrigo on the left, Gyökeres down the middle, or SESKO, Saka on the right, then you have Zubimendi, Declan Rice, Odegaard. I don't know where Kai Havertz even goes then. And then you have Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Miles Lewis-Skelly, David Raya, and you sign an Eze. And, that's where we need to be. I think I would like the club to pursue the Rodrigo option like they did Declan. Throw the kitchen sink at getting Rodrigo. He's a game changer. I like all these players. They're nice players, I mean, this young guy Mosquera, we don't know. You've told us, it's not for the now. Zubimendi, we've seen him play world class. I think he is. How is he going to adapt to the Premier League? We don't know yet. SESKO, same thing, right? Eze, just a wonderful, wonderful player, super talented. Very, very good. Norgard, Rodrigo is a marquee signing, and I think we need a marquee signing, Tom.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Arsenal need to. I would add for the record, I think Zubimendi is a marquee signing. I think he's the best number 6 on the market that we could have signed. And I think just because we would link with him all the way back in January, we've kind of been fatigued with that. And so we've known it's happening for ages and it's lost its sheen, lost its shine. I think he's a marquee deal. But certainly Rodrigo, Real Madrid, Brazilian national team starter, 14 goals, 11 assists last season, in a season where, it wasn't necessarily his best campaign. Season before that, 26 goal contributions. Season before that, 30 goal contributions. These are very good numbers for a player who's still only 24. And yeah, it'd be exciting. And he's obviously playing out of position on the right. His natural role is on the left. So seeing what he could do on the left-hand side for Arsenal with Saka on the right and a new centre forward, that's exciting, definitely.
Is the City stuff real with him?
City and Rodrigo?
Yeah. I haven't heard too much about that.
Anything. I mean, you've always got to be careful of City. If a big player becomes available, sometimes they pounce. So do Chelsea. They're always there.
Super Tom, we've talked about loosely, I had to mention Gyökeres just because we've talked about everyone a little bit. And is there someone that I have not asked you about that we need to keep our eye on a little bit? Is there? And by the way, I love showing these two because I miss these guys. Can't wait. I love this picture of Declan, by the way. Big Gabby, we've missed so much. I love this picture of Saka and Waneri and Calafiori. Can't wait for the football to come back. I've kind of missed it now. But is there anything that I haven't asked that I should have?
I don't think so. I think we have obviously Kepa the keeper. Is going to be announced this week, maybe tomorrow. But
why?
Week...
Do you have an invite to go down to Soba?
Oh, those brown envelopes, mate. They don't stop. But this week, Kepa and Zubi, I'm expecting some announcements. So it's July's big. July's the special month where everything gets going. But no, not really. The players that we're talking to, your Gyökeres, your SESKOs, they're the two. Eze, Rodrigo, they are very real targets.
Why do people want me to ask you about Timber's interview?
Timber did an interview. He kind of basically turned around and he said a couple of things. He said he thought that
Is that the one where he talked about injuries and stuff?
He did talk about his injury. He talked about playing through pain and playing, when he was effectively playing when he was injured because we were in the Champions League semi-final and he had to, and Ben White wasn't fully fit still. And yeah, that's why Mosquera's coming in, you know, so that's why we're adding more players. But next season, there's certainly a sense that though the likes of Timber, Gabriel, who have had injuries, Ben White, who's not been fully himself. I was chatting to someone at the club today and I said, how's Timber's kind of recovery going? And, you know, while, you know, I wasn't given specifics, certainly the sense is that unless there is injuries in pre-season, which is always a danger, but hopefully it'll be fine, that we should be pretty much ready and raring to go, bar the long-term absences of Jesus and Tomiyasu. So, yeah, squad should be in a good place.
Do you think Timber's in trouble?
No, I don't think so. No.
I'd have thought maybe he might get in trouble for that interview.
No,
if I was Mikel,
I haven't heard anything.
If I was Mikel Arteta, I wouldn't.
Anything.
It felt like he was kind of throwing Mikel under the bus, or
oh, really? I didn't read it that way, but maybe I'm biased. I just read it as like he was being very honest about, you know, playing while he was, you know, still in pain. I think he wanted to contribute. If a player categorically doesn't want to play or they're genuinely injured, they will say, you know, if they cannot play and they know that themselves, because sometimes players, you know, convince themselves they're fine when they're not. But if he was genuinely in a position where he felt he shouldn't be playing, he won't be playing. Simple as that.
Yeah, get it. All right. Well, not only has Tom come in and super subbed, but we've gone for an hour and 16 minutes. It has been 3 weeks since our last show. And so it felt like, you know, it was a must.
Well on.
This can be Tom's first question to Arteta in the next presser. We're going to let Tom go now. What's happening in the morning show tomorrow? What have you got lined up?
No, we're chatting obviously about Eze and that news that dropped today surrounding him, and you know the acceleration, it being July tomorrow, of course, as well. Big month threshold has been crossed, and Arsenal can finally start properly announcing deals and stuff like that. So yeah,
look at Berta. I like it. I think there are going to be a lot of people eating a bit of crow when it comes to the end of this window. I live in hope because Big Berta and his Benjamins will get very active, Tom. I'm full of hope. Thank you for sweltering in the heat with me. You know, and you're not even perimenopausal. I mean, look, this is crazy.
Hey, don't assume that.
You can find, I didn't even have time to write the handles on the banners. So he's at Tom Canton Media and at the Gooner Talk TV. Listen to our Chief Like Officer, Tammy, and hit that like button, please. Make sure you go check out. Tom did a really good piece on
Partey, no doubt.
Yes. And don't you have one coming up on Mosquera?
I've got one out on Mosquera.
Right.
You can go and read a little bit about him. So
go check that out as well. Thank you, squaddies. It's been wonderful seeing you again. I'm wearing a pint. Listen, you missed the whole thing at the beginning, Harvey. Just rewind the show. Thank you so much, squaddies. It's been great being back. I think Harry's on tomorrow. I don't know. I got a text from him.
Moan at him about
while we were on. Kenny Ken is on Thursday, and we might do a double bill because Ben's rescheduled for Thursday as well. So we've got a busy week coming up. Thank you, Teng. Wonderful show. Thank you, Newman. I appreciate you for showing up right there at the death. He was watching Potsy's show. Apparently, I didn't give them enough notice, but thanks to all 600 of you who are in here live. Hit the like button at EZE Squaddies. Don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. Thanks, Tom.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
I know, Tom, seriously.